Crime Curious is a true crime podcast that takes an in-depth look into real cases through the lens of a trained investigator and former prosecutor turned judge.
If you are sensitive to expletives, anatomical descriptions, and accurate descriptions of crime scenes, this podcast may not be suitable for you.
Welcome to Crime Curious. I'm Charnell.
I'm Megan.
Let's shake our gree-gree. Or good luck here.
I almost said I am Gree-Gree.
Welcome to Crime Curious. I am Gree-Gree.
I am Gree-Gree.
Right. I am Groot.
I am Groot. Yes, I am Groot today. Don't you just want to dig your roots in a little bit?
Yes, I have had to ground my energy several times today. It has been, and just for reference, if you guys know of any weird things going on in the universe, it is October 11th, 2023, and nothing has went right for anyone today.
Well, war has broken out in the Holy Land.
It has.
We are in a weird funk in terms of a global environment.
Yeah, it has disrupted the energy. It has.
And then on top of that, we have all kinds of other things happening, and some of them are good. Like it's Shocktober, and I think we're shocking you with this case today.
We are.
We've got fall and changing weather, and in Michigan, that means like funks and headaches and weird energies in general and spooky shit happening. And then also pumpkin spice is available everywhere and
on everything. Form. Yes.
Yeah. Have you eaten
perfume,
pumpkin spice perfume and like Cheetos?
Yeah, I mean you can have it from lips to tips if
lips
you want.
To tips. That's
it's
true.
everywhere.
Baby, will you get out the pumpkin spice condoms tonight? Let's bake us a pie.
I'm so glad that you understood what I meant by that.
Oh, I knew what you meant. We are on the same wavelength.
Always.
And possibly share the same brainwave.
The same brainwave.
Well, we've almost completed the bottle. Almost. I have. You've sipped because you haven't eaten.
Because I'm talking. I'm presenting the case. But this bottle's helping you get through this horrific story. However, I'm happy to bring us part 2. We are going to talk about the investigation that takes place, the trials that take place, and who these boys were.
Is this still the same book, or is this a new book?
It's kind of both. It's both the first book, but then also Briannon, our lovely Patreon, who recommended this case to us. Just so you know that you are jumping in on part 2, so go listen to part 1 so that you're not lost, because you've missed a lot. Part 2 is a lot about the other book she sent us that's called Gitchie Girl Uncovered, The True Story of the Night of Mass Murder and the Hunt for the Deranged Killers by Phil Hammond and Sandy Hammond.
So they did write a sequel or kind of a...
They did.
Or kind of even a company, a read-along book, because I'm assuming some of it's at the same time frame.
It is. Let me tell you, Gitchie Girl is telling the story from Sandra's perspective.
Okay.
Gitchie Girl Uncovered talks about, it goes more in depth.
Is it more third person or omniscient point of view where you have them telling it more neutrally from different people?
Yes, because it goes more in depth into the investigation than Gitchie Girl did.
Which is hard to do from her perspective.
Correct,
because she wasn't privy to it. Girl and not, okay.
Yep.
Thank you for clarifying. Yep. I think that's helpful.
So Gitchie Girl Uncovered is more of like the interviews that the authors did with the law enforcement at the time and following the trials and things like that, of things that she wouldn't have known, because she was being 13 and going through the trauma of all of this as well. So let's pick up at 2 a.m. Saturday. No, I'm sorry. It's actually Sunday, November 18th, 1973, 2 a.m. Sandra Cheskey was just dropped off back at home, unexplained, by a man who had kidnapped her and 4 of her friends. The man was called the Boss, and he was working with 2 other men who called themselves RJ and Hatchet Face. And Sandra and her friends, Roger Essam, Mike Hadrith, Stu and Dana Bade, they were brothers, had been at what was called the Gitchie Manitou State Park, having a bonfire, smoking a little bit of weed, and listening to Stu and Dana play music when they had been attacked by the 3 strangers that I mentioned before, RJ, Hatchetface, and the boss. When Sandra was walking into her home, all she knows is that she had been violently sexually assaulted by the man that called himself RJ, while the other two men stood outside the truck. The men claimed to be cops. She has no idea that her 4 friends, one of which, Roger, was her boyfriend, at this point in time have all been murdered. Sandra goes to her brother Bob first to wake him up. She tells him what she knew of the very long night, a night that aged Sandra several lifetimes and one that would change this current lifetime forever. Bob told her that she needed to call the police, but they both feared what would happen since these 3 men claimed to be the cops, and so they just didn't know. Bob told her, get some sleep, think about it. No, and then we will reconvene in the morning. I mean, it's 2 a.m.
I understand why.
Yep.
I hate it, but I understand why. Bob's a child too.
Yes, exactly. At 9 a.m., she woke up and tried to call Roger's house first.
And he wasn't going to fucking answer because he's dead. Oh, my God.
Right. The phone just kept ringing. She called Debbie, and she asked if Debbie could come over. Debbie's like, listen, I can after church. I can't skip church this week because my mom is telling me I absolutely have to go. She's got to go get herself some Jesus that day.
You will go to hell if you don't come with Mom to church.
So she tried Roger's home again, and this time someone answered, but told her that he had not come home for the night, which was not super concerning to the family because he was 17 years old. He had lots of friends in the neighborhood.
Dude, he was out partying a little. He probably said he was spending the night someplace anyway.
Well, right. And they typically crashed at one another's houses for the night and then would come walking in the next morning, right?
Right. Absolutely.
So when Debbie arrives after church, Sandra spilled the whole story to her and wanted to go, like, Sandra wanted Debbie to go with her to go back out to the campsite to see if maybe the boys were still stranded out there. Now, Debbie didn't have her vehicle at this point in time, so they didn't have a ride, so they hitchhiked, very normal for 1973. A lady picked them up, took them as far as Sioux Falls, where they were planning on hitching another ride to Gitchie at that point in time, but they stopped at a payphone first.
Okay. Sandra
wanted to try Roger again and see what was going on. At this point in time, one of his brothers answers, and she asked if Roger was there, and then just kept talking without the brother being able to give her an answer. She asks if Roger is there and then says, I know what happened to him because I was with him last night and these 3 men came on us and they said they were cops and they shot at us. They said the bullets weren't real, that they were tranquilizers. The brother told her to slow down, and she interrupted and said, one of them raped me. So he immediately asked her where she was and said, I want to come pick you up. What he did not tell Sandra is that earlier that morning, his family had been notified by the police of Roger's murder.
They already knew.
Yes. Because remember where we started this story about the 3 bodies that were found?
And they're wondering where the hell she is.
At
least the family members.
They don't know that she was with him at the time. Now they do. But there were 4 boys. So at the very beginning of this story, in part 1, I tell you that a driver found 3 bodies by the side of the road, and he calls it into the police. The police come out. They find the 3 bodies. These are the 3 boys that were executed execution style. Roger was found back at the campsite later during the investigation.
Okay.
So just so you know, I started the case with 3 bodies being found, even though there are 4 victims, because initially they only had those 3 bodies. Then they found the campsite, and that was where Roger's body was.
Roger was the first one shot and killed by the campfire.
Yep, and was Sandra's boyfriend.
Right.
So Roger's family, the first time that Sandra called Roger's family, they hadn't been notified yet. They just said, hey, he didn't come home last night.
I remember.
Right? And so she's like, okay. She hangs up. She calls Debbie. Debbie says, I'll come pick you up I'll come to you after church. She gets dropped off after church, and they hitchhike to Sioux Falls, where she's like, I just got to try Roger one more time before I actually hitchhike all the way back out to Gitchie. And that is when Roger's brother picks up and knows by this point in time that Roger is dead.
And she had been
And
with them
she
last
says,
night.
yep, she interrupts before he has a time.
She doesn't know he's dead.
Because she doesn't know, right? So before he can say, no, Sandra, he is dead, whatever, she just says, I was with him last night. I know what
raped.
happened. There were 3 men that came upon us and I was raped. So he was like, okay, where are you? I'm going to come pick you up. And what he does is he picks Debbie and Sandra up and he takes them right to the police station.
Good boy.
Okay. He did not tell them during that ride what had happened.
What a smart boy.
For sure. Because he doesn't know if she's involved.
Agreed.
Right? And so he also doesn't tell her that that's where he's taking her.
He
Just
did
so you
the
know.
absolute right thing.
Yep.
Thinking under pressure right there.
Mm-hmm. And so he just simply walks them into the detective's office that had came to their house and talked to them earlier that morning and says, this was the girl that was with my brother last night. The detective tells 13-year-old Sandra that a homicide has occurred. He asked her if she knew what that was. She didn't know.
No.
But being 13 and not wanting him to think that she was dumb, her words, not mine, she just shook her head. Okay, because she didn't want him to think that I'm not smart, so therefore I'm not a credible person. So she just shakes her head, yes. Like, yes, I know what a homicide is.
Can he use the term murder?
Nope, he used the term homicide. Again, we're more informed now. We know how to meet people where they are. In 1973, that wasn't
to meet
as
adults
much of a
where
thing.
they are when I talk to them, let
For
alone
sure,
a 13-year-old girl.
So they began reading her Miranda rights.
Oh, Jesus.
And Roger's brother flew into a fit of rage, asking them what the fuck they were doing. Their words, not even mine, even though that sounds like something I'd say. Trying to explain to them that she is a victim too. So they made him leave the room and said, this is standard procedure. Sandra at this point is still very confused. She does not know the truth, that all of her friends are dead. They ask her for her statement, and Sandra, being very well-spoken, very mature for her age, gave them as many details as she could. As a matter of fact, Megan, it was 10 pages of details by the time the police were done taking her statement. But the problem is, it didn't add up in their investigation standpoint because it just didn't seem to make sense. Why did the boss allow her to live to tell the tale? So this made her the prime suspect in their eyes.
She's 13 years old.
Mm-hmm. At the very
They didn't
least,
do rape kits then, did they?
They did. We'll get to it.
Okay.
At the very least, an accomplice. If she wasn't an active participant, they believed her to be an accomplice to the supposed 3 men that were involved. The other thing that did not add up is how she could have witnessed the murders and be so cold and detailed in that moment in those statements, not showing any emotion while she gave her statement.
She
and
didn't
they
know
actually
they were dead.
made note of it. They made note of her coldness. Exactly, Megan, because she didn't know that they were dead. So she doesn't have emotion. She's trying to just catch the bad guys, right? That did the bad thing to her.
They've been tranquilized and she's been raped. And it's all because of drugs.
Yep.
And it was police.
So they're just not realizing that she still doesn't know. So she thought homicide was a crime.
It was.
But she thought that it might have something to do with the drug raids that the 3 men said they were doing. She is still wondering if she's in trouble at this point in time, especially since they read her Miranda rights.
Right.
So they asked her to write a statement, which she did, feeling helpful, feeling like she was doing something that could bring these bad guys who shot at her friends with tranquilizers and raped her, bring them to justice. But she did not know that the police who took her initial report made comments and remarks of their own about how she was so cold because she could so easily give a verbal and written statement. And by the time she was done, fatigue was settled in, just as the detectives were starting to come and the other detectives were coming and taking over. So it's now time for me to bring back a character that I've not mentioned since part 1, since the beginning of this case. The amazing Sheriff Craig Vinson.
Okay.
I mentioned him in the beginning. He was the one that was called that initially responded to the bodies. So he also brought in, you're going to love this, he brought in a female officer with him to record her statement.
In the 70s. How progressive of them.
Yep. I loved it. He wanted her to give him a statement herself so that he could get as accurate as possible of an assessment of this girl who his coworkers are saying are cold is cold and calculating and all this stuff.
And a suspect.
Mm-hmm. So he watched as she spoke maturely, eloquently, reliving the entire night, yet again for the third time. Let's go over how many times this girl's been re-traumatized.
You don't even want to know what that does to our brains, knowing that you put children through minimal interviews now when they've had trauma occur. They just didn't do that in the 70s.
Nope. When she was done, he let her know that she's been through a lot, that she should rest now. He said, I've got your mom on the way. So she laid her head in her arms and she drifted off to sleep on accident, and like right on the table. And she was awakened by the gentle touch of her mom, Lolo, shaking her arm. Sheriff Vincent said to Lolo, "Ma'am, your daughter has been very helpful and provided excellent information. We hope it will prove very useful in catching the murderers." Sandra whispers to her mom, "Murderers?"
Yeah, that's when she realizes.
And
I have
then
chills.
she realizes what homicide meant. She's hysterical at this point. So hysterical that she collapses to the floor and she has to be taken to the hospital.
Okay.
Okay.
Does the sheriff realize now, holy shit, this girl didn't know they died until I just said this?
They make note of her reaction. Yes. She's taken, you're going to hate this part. As much as Sheriff Vincent was trauma informed, the hospital staff, not so much.
Oh, great.
She's taken into a white room and put into a gown. Her mom gives consent for a pelvic exam. Now, keep in mind that she's exhausted. Reality of the situation has now set in and she's traumatized. And now her mother has to leave the room while 3 men in white coats and masks come in to do a pelvic exam.
Right. So you've been sexually assaulted and now they took your mom away and you're going to have somebody's gloved fingers shoved inside your vagina.
And a speculum and all of those things. And there's 3 men, just like there were that night.
Oh my God.
3 men.
The trauma. Right. Okay.
So, just so you all know, this would not happen today.
No.
But it happened then. So they performed the exam for evidence. Sandra and her family had to go stay with a relative while the killers were on the loose because they knew where Sandra lived. And the news of the 4 murdered teens was all over the news. So now they know that Sandra has squealed as well, that the teens have been found, that there was a survivor. So she's in danger. She did not realize that it could get worse than this moment because what she thought was rock bottom was not actually rock bottom. Rock bottom is that the truth of the matter is that for the next 18 months, Sandra would be put through public trial. She would be ridiculed, blamed, and flat out called a liar. There were news articles calling her into question. There were police officers on the current force that did not believe her. Sandra worked closely with the police, working with a sketch artist to come up with composite sketches to release to the public. She was taken back to the very place the boys were murdered to walk them through what happened, traumatizing her again.
I know. Unfortunately, that is a necessary trauma right there with Charnell.
It is. That's the one I agree with.
I know.
Right. She's 13. She's not allowed to attend the boys' funerals for her own safety. She begged to be able to attend Roger's, though, and for the first time ever, she showed defiance and said that she would run away if she was not allowed to attend Roger's funeral.
Did his family
this is her first
Did his
love.
family believe her?
We will get to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Don't break my heart.
Not all of them initially.
Okay.
But she does have, I believe it's one of Roger's sisters is one of her dearest friends today and helped her write these books. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So they did set up a way for her to enter in the back at Roger's funeral and stay behind a curtain behind the stage until a family member heard that she was there and in their grief went back there and screamed that she did not belong there, screamed at her that she knew more than she was telling the cops and that they did not want her there.
Okay.
So she had to leave.
I understand.
I know, exactly. But she's 13. She's a baby.
She doesn't understand.
She doesn't understand anything. And not getting to say goodbye to her first love that was brutally murdered in front of her and her not realizing that he was murdered until after the fact. She's so young and innocent. She did not even realize that men could lie about being cops, lie about bullets being real or fake. And now she's being accused of being savvy enough to lie to the police. She also heard rumors around town that people thought that she had a jealous boyfriend who had killed the boys and just made up the 3 men posing as cops story.
Of course.
Because she's gorgeous. You also need to be aware that there's an ethnicity thing in here because she has Native American heritage, and you can see it in her features. Absolutely. So Sandra and her family are safely transferred to a safe house. And remarkably, Sheriff Vinson not only believed her, but knew that she would be the piece of the puzzle that brings justice. Amongst most of the police force and even the Iowa Bureau of Investigations, Sheriff Vinson drove Sandra around for days, for hours, looking for the abandoned farmhouse that she described where she was raped. It had a red gas tank. Sandra never changed her story or wavered on the description, so Sheriff Vinson was convinced that they could stumble upon that abandoned farmhouse with the red gas tank if they just kept trying.
For those of you that may be wondering, that by gas tank, Charnell literally means like what you used, a propane tank, something that you'd use to fuel as fuel out in the country.
Mm-hmm. Well,
and red is bizarre.
Red is bizarre. They're usually white.
Correct.
Yep.
Mine is.
Yep. A majority of them are. My mom cleans hers because she thinks that it's rude to leave a dirty gas tank for the gas man.
I've always had bushes surrounding mine, and mine were recently pulled out so that I could do some landscaping. And I looked at it and went, I don't know what to do with this. I think I need to plant flowers.
I think I need to put the bushes back.
Well, no, because they were right from the 70s.
Get it?
Move on. Move on quickly.
So here we go. They drove for hours, Megan. And while they were driving, other pieces of evidence are being gathered, okay, in the event that they are able to make an arrest and an eventual trial comes to
fruition.
To fruition. Now, trigger alert. I wasn't going to initially include this information, but I think it's important to make it very clear the brutality and the evil that was done to these victims. So I'm going to read for you the autopsy notes. I know, I see your face.
No, I'm one of those people who I as much as I don't want to hear it, I want to hear it. Mm-hmm. I want the information.
I get it. So just for to cite my sources here, y'all, I am reading from Gitchie Girl, The Survivor's Inside Story of the Mass Murders That Shocked the Heartland by Phil Hammond and Sandy Hammond. So these are the autopsy notes. Roger Essam, male, 17 years old. Multiple wounds to the head, face, upper chest, and arms. 7 exit wounds. Skull fractures, brain wounds. Stuart Bade, male, 18 years old. Wounds to the chest, abdomen, and right upper leg. Extensive wounds to the left hand. Large gaping wound to the middle of back and buttocks. Mike Hadrith, male, 15 years old. Wounds to the upper left chest, left upper arm, left side of face, left hand and wrist. Also shots to the back, buttocks, and legs. One of the pathologists reviewed the notes where he determined that this had happened after the initial wounds and while the victim was likely lying face down on the ground. Dana Bade, male, 14 years old. Wounds to the right chest, heart, and back. The pathologist also removed what was later determined by ballistic experts to be number 4 and double-aught buckshot from the bodies of Stu and Mike, number 4 buckshot from Roger, and double-aught buckshot from Dana. What this says to us, y'all, is that even after the boys were long perished, there was continuous abuse to their body.
That's what it sounds like.
To their body.
Like either they were continually shot afterwards, like used it as target practice, or some other type of traumas were occurring.
Nope, out of sport. They were continuously shot. Rounds were continuously shot into them.
And the 3 that were shot execution style, were they on the side of the road or placed there?
That's where they were shot.
That's what I thought.
Right where the truck was that Sandra got into and was told, if you just, I can get you out of this.
So
if you just get in the truck.
After they drove off with her, the people that were left there, the murderers that were left there, were any of them left there?
It was Hatchet and JR.
That's right.
With the 3 boys.
They continued to shoot them.
Correct. Dana, Stu, and Mike.
Okay.
And then Roger was left because
At
he
the
was already
campsite.
dead at the
And they
campsite.
never dragged him or anything. He was
Nope.
left at the
They
campsite.
left
But it
him.
sounds like he had post-mortem injuries too.
He did. Oh,
Okay.
yeah. Yep. All right. So Vision got Sheriff Vincent got a lot of heat for trusting Sandra from his coworkers, from the public, even from the Iowa Bureau of Investigations. They put her through the IBI put her through an extensive polygraph test where 2 investigators tried their best to trip her up and couldn't. So they came out and told Vincent she's telling the truth. Then Vincent lets them know the medical exam also confirmed that she had been raped.
Okay.
So now the Iowa Bureau of Investigations knows this girl is telling the truth and she is a victim. Okay. But this information can't be released to the public. So you can imagine that they are making their own conclusions and rumors in the very place that Sandra and her family are living, working, and grieving. Sandra can't attend school.
And where a potential trial is going to be held.
Correct. She can't attend school. She's grieving the loss of her first love and her friends, and riding along daily with Officer Vincent, sheriff, I should say.
Still trying to find the house with the propane
look for the
tank.
abandoned house. Yep. He could see it was taking a toll on her, but he also learned a lot about her as a person. How she wished that her mom did not have to work so much because she loved spending time with her. And not in a selfish way, in just more of a, gosh, she's a hard worker and I wish we could be together more way.
Did she talk to him about her being in foster care and all those type of things? He became a confidant.
He did. And she would ask him questions about his family life. For example, she really wanted to know about how they all ate dinner as a family, because that is something that, due to her parents' work schedule and just trying to make ends meet, they didn't get to do. Yeah. Finally, one day, 2 weeks after the murders, they're driving and Sandra suddenly screams out as a truck passes them. And she screams, "That's the boss." There was another police officer riding with them in the back. They knew Sandra was likely spot on because she had told them about the truck, a description of the truck, and that there was a gun rack in the back. And they saw the rack in the back, so they pull over, they do a U-turn. Officer Vincent.
She's literally there.
She's there.
When they pull over the, oh my God.
What he does, Sheriff Vincent had the other detective and Sandra exit the car and keep themselves hidden while he sped up to pull the truck over.
Okay.
Yep. The truck did not try to flee, just pulled over, and the man looked just like the description that Sandra gave, as did the truck.
I'd be a sarcastic motherfucker, and when I walked up to the car, I'd be like, "Hey, yo, boss, why don't you hand me your driver's license, boss?"
The boss exited the vehicle and did not try to resist. Sheriff Vincent arrested Alan E. Fryer, age 29, a hired hand that worked on machinery on the farm and tend to the livestock. It was not his farm. The farmer did later tell police that in his spare time, Alan Fryer liked to sit for hours polishing his shotgun over and over. It wasn't an abandoned farm. It just looked like it was to Sandra, to a 13-year-old.
So it was a working farm.
Yep, and he was a hired hand there.
Okay.
During his initial interview, Alan the boss Fryer, denied any knowledge of the murders. The detectives handled this case expertly and offered him many bathroom, cigarette, and food breaks.
As we've seen before.
Eventually, he did admit to pheasant hunting in the area the night of the murders, okay, but still claimed he didn't have anything to do with them.
You're hunting pheasant at night, sir?
At night in the dark,
Well,
when the pheasants are roosting? Okay.
and also, can I see your license?
Yeah. I'm right. I don't.
Your hunting license?
Maybe he did have one. But I also don't know that it's allowed in the state parks. I'm not sure about those.
No,
there's in 1973.
I think that they actually were kind of
Probably.
open areas where people who didn't have land of their own could go and hunt.
Probably. Immediately, Alan's brothers, David L. Fryer, or Hatchet Face, as we have known him to this point, and James R. Fryer, or Jr., were arrested.
These are brothers.
They're all fucking brothers.
And they are the spawn of Satan?
They sure are. It turns out I think Satan's mistress is their mother.
And her name is?
I actually didn't make note of it.
It's not worth saying.
It's not. It's possible they were hatched instead of actually birthed.
Oh, in her defense, it is possible. Changelings, right?
Yeah.
Her babies were changed out for these things.
Perhaps.
Pseudo-humans.
Either way, Satan is definitely their daddy.
I've got to know shit about these people. Please tell me you have some background.
Well, this is where I'm going to tell you that you can read more about them in Gitchie Girl Uncovered. But I didn't spend a whole lot of time telling you a ton about them. It's nothing surprising. They're, especially for 1973, they're just your run-of-the-mill pieces of shit.
So,
yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Good to know.
I get to it a bit.
Well, is there severe childhood trauma or sexual abuse? Were they abandoned by their dad? Did their mommy beat them? Did she Norman Bates them or what?
I think they had a regular upbringing for the 60s,
because our victim, she's had a pretty traumatic past in terms of stuff that's happened
and
to
she's
her.
A fabulous
and
person.
She's a lovely young lady.
So the long and the short of it, y'all, is that we really don't get the real story, because these three flesh sacks of evil and despair, they recant, they twist details, and they blame one another so much that it's just like you can't even follow it. What it boils down to.
Pointing fingers at each brother.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Who's the most culpable? God, this sounds familiar, doesn't it?
Yep. And honestly, we don't really get to the why they wanted to do this. We don't get to exactly who pulled the triggers on whom, because the truth is that there's multiple injuries to these boys. So all three are fucking responsible. All three pulled the triggers, and all three blamed each other.
Was this planned out in advance, premeditated, or did they just come upon
they
these
say
people?
they just came upon them. And that's even scarier.
It is.
That is even scarier. It was just like, here's a bunch of kids.
Noise.
Let's murder
them. That was
them.
my soul creaking.
That was weird.
Bullshit. In terms of making the argument that it was so impromptu, at the very minimum, there was a conversation that happened before for all three of them to have known what it was and what the plan was.
This is what I think what happened.
Enough to require premeditation.
I think that they looked at them and said, there's 4 punk teenage boys and 1 gorgeous girl. I want that girl. Let's kill the boys. I'm going to have that girl.
Okay.
That's truly where I think that it comes from. And they didn't realize. And the boss is just like, whatever JR wants. No big deal. It's no skin off my dick, right? So he's like, sure, fine. We'll kill these kids. You go have your fun. Then he finds out she's 13. And now he suddenly just has like you said, you suddenly have a conscience. Well, it's made it personal now because that's the same age as his stepdaughter.
Right.
Who apparently he did care for. Anywho.
Yeah. So
David and Alan Fryer, that's Hatchet Face and the boss, they were placed in a small jail in Rock Rapids where James was taken back, JR, was taken back to the Minnehaha County Jail in Sioux Falls, where he had actually been already serving a sentence, one that allowed him work release, Megan.
Oh, my God.
Records show that he signed himself back into jail at 2:30 a.m. the night of the murders. Sandra can finally feel safe again, aside from the fear of the trauma triggers, of course. The murderers are behind bars. That is until Alan and David are able to use their shoddy old jail cell bolts to their advantage, and they escape. In 1973, this jail is old school. So old school that Sheriff Vinson and his wife actually live on site at the jail.
Really?
His wife was like the cook for the inmates. She made them their meals.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was an old 2-story building with cells on the upper level and the sheriff's office on the lower. Now, although he dropped out of school at 7th grade at the age of 16, he was 16 in 7th grade. He had an IQ of 87 with little to no reading and writing skills. Alan, however, was very talented at mechanics, and he used his skill to his advantage. After Sheriff Vinson shut off the lights and locked up for the night, he noticed that the beds were secured to the wall with hooks and chains.
Okay.
He was able to remove the hook. So picture a hook.
I picture it.
And as it happens, this hook fit perfectly around the bolts that were hinging the cell door to the wall. So just like it was a wrench, he used the hook to unscrew the bolts bit by bit from the hinges until they popped out and he could just take the door off.
Christ almighty.
And so he just walks over to Vincent's desk, grabs the keys, busts out his brother, David.
There was a literal jailbreak in this case.
Sure is. So it was actually Sheriff Vincent's wife that realizes that the inmates have busted loose because she was bringing them their breakfast tray the next morning.
And they weren't there.
And this is another reason why I love Sheriff Vincent. Instead of worrying about how this looks on him, his first priority, get Sandra to safety. Okay. These two murderers are on the loose again. Get Sandra to safety. But alas, David and Alan's little vacation didn't last long because within a week, they hit a pedestrian with a stolen vehicle and were arrested without issue. The pedestrian is okay, by the way.
And they didn't resist.
They didn't resist. They're transported back to Iowa for the murder charges, and the pedestrian is fine.
Okay.
All right. So at this point, they have a complicated situation. All the brothers are turning on one another, and each is trying to implicate themselves less and less. Okay. So David said that he would never plead guilty because he told his mama that he didn't do it, and he did not want to disappoint his mama.
Okay, sir.
He's probably the baby of the family. And I say that as the baby of the family.
Your mom's already disappointed, son. You're in jail.
I'm sorry. She was disappointed when you were born and she looked at you. But while they took him out to the scene of the crime, he confessed to dozens of other unsolved burglaries in the area, allowing them to close those cases. So guess what, Mama? You know, I guess it's okay that your baby is a thief, but she draws the line at murder.
Right. It was my other brothers because I'm a thief and I break into places, but I've never killed anyone. So therefore, they're the culpable ones here. See?
Right.
Look at me come clean.
So let me take you to the trials. I know these are your favorite parts, and you really will. I will give you this book to read if you would like it.
Yes.
After you'll like the trial parts. Alan the Boss Friar's trial was first, and young Sandra had to be brought in special entrances, of course, because of all of the limelight around this and all of you got to remember
trying to protect
the
her.
Headlines at the time are very convoluted. They're blaming Sandra still.
I know.
Okay. So she is the prosecution's star witness at the tender age of 13. She is put on the stand for the defense, for the prosecution, where the defense would try to confuse her. They would rapid fire questions at her. They would do what they could to discredit her as a witness, but she sat there and she prevailed. The trials lasted more than a year.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Sandra was called upon to testify numerous times over and over that year. And each time having her name splattered in the news, each time circulating more rumors and speculation about her. And remember, she looks older than she really is, and race plays a role here as she has Native American heritage. So she has to continuously endure this. And remember, the reason it was so convoluted is because of the way the brothers were turning on each other, recanting their statements, reassessing their statements, making different claims to try to make themselves less culpable.
But she's been consistent.
She sure has, and her testimony has never changed. And the defense was never able to get her to trip up.
Good.
It's Sandra's testimony over and over that debunks the claims made over and over by the brothers in what ends up being literally the crux for the defense. Sandra takes them down.
Okay.
This time was understandably not easy for Sandra. She could only sleep if her mother was next to her, and she often woke up having night terrors. She lost friends. No one wanted their child to hang out with, quote, the Gitchie girl. That was the name that she was dubbed.
Okay.
Over and over in the news and in school, the Gitchie girl.
Both for the name, place, and potentially a derogatory Native American commentary as to who she was.
Yes, because the site was actually a Native American site.
Made into a state park.
Well known, yep.
Gitchie Manitou.
Yes, and it It stood for, what did I say in the beginning?
Big
free spirit, something like
something like
that.
that.
Yeah, it was a well-known, place. So David, or Hatchet Face, as I told you in the beginning, said he would never plead guilty because he didn't want to disappoint his mama. He ends up being the first one to plead guilty. So he pled to 3 counts of murder and 1 count of manslaughter. He did not like prison very much. He actually said it was like living with a bunch of wild hogs, and he wanted to write the governor to ask for the death penalty. He'd rather die than live with the wild hogs. Well, sir, you are worse than wild hogs. Do not insult wild hogs like that. They have at least a code of conduct.
Hogs are pretty smart, actually.
They sure are.
Very destructive, though.
So now I will refer back to Gitchie Girl, the survivor's inside story of the mass murders that shocked the heartland by Phil Hammond and Sandy Hammond. And I'm going to read for you from page 121, just to make sure I get all of these details clear.
Okay.
All right. Quote, Alan was found guilty of 4 counts of first-degree murder. He had 2 prior felony convictions. In a pretrial interview, one parole officer stated that Alan had killed in the manner of one simply poaching a deer. He was sentenced to 4 terms of life in prison. James was found guilty of 3 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of manslaughter.
This is JR.
Mm-hmm. He was given 3 terms of life and 1 term of 8 years for manslaughter. The prosecution made the decision not to pursue the charge of rape since he would be locked up for life. And then she wouldn't have to testify about that piece. There were 3 sent to that was not in the quote. That was me looking at Megan.
I know it was.
Continuing with the quote, all 3 men were sent to the maximum security penitentiary in Fort Madison, Iowa. At the time, Iowa did not have the death penalty, end quote. So, the scariest part of all, Megan, is that even at the end of the year-long trials, no one could establish a clear motive for these murders.
Deer poaching sounds about like one.
Mm-hmm.
Just complete lack of respect for human life.
And
he treated
remorse.
them as hunting. They were hunting.
Mm-hmm. We all know there is not a good reason to take another person's life, maybe other than self-defense.
Can I correct something?
Sure.
Hunters actually hunt with honor usually, and for meat. And there are some sports hunters. That's more what I would refer to them as. I would never insult hunters.
Well, like he said, he actually said poachers.
Yeah,
Poachers for deer.
Poachers
not
for deer.
Not hunters. He said poachers.
Okay, so that's what I'm correcting. My hunting statement too is poaching instead.
Yep. So, the lives of 4 teenage boys, ages 14, 15, 17, and 18, the exact ages of my children currently. So you can see why I had such a hard time with this.
I do.
There is never a good reason, but here it was simply a case of 3 evil men wandering in the dark in the woods and a group of innocent teenagers being in the wrong place at the wrong time. So that's the end of the trials that I have for you, because truly, can you imagine after a year-long kafuckery, which is a new word that I've just created, still not knowing you get the sentences you want, but still not knowing why? So let's talk aftermath.
Okay.
Sandra's life did not get back on track for a long while. School was never the same. Rumors abounded, and eventually she couldn't take it. She dropped out and she moved in with her brother Bill to work full-time. I will insert, because I can't remember if I added it later, but she did go back and get her GED.
Good.
But she would busy herself with work by day and party to numb away the pain by night. She met people at these parties that were not healthy for her, and eventually she was introduced to the drug speed. She liked the energy that she got from it and the fact that she could go all day without feeling the need to eat, but had energy. The one thing about her though, is that when the pills ran out, she didn't feel the need to take them again. She never became addicted to them. She just abused them from time to time. She was 16 and basically an adult. By 18, she moved away with Bill's girlfriend while his girlfriend was attending interior design school and Sandra worked in retail. When the school year was over, they moved back to Sioux Falls and Sandra met a man named Carroll Kranz. Carroll, Carroll.
Okay.
Carroll Kranz. He turned out to be the owner of a pawn shop that Bill worked at, and for a long time, the two were just casual friends. Until after a while, Carol bought her a beer, and she noticed that he would only drink one and then be done. Something that she noticed others that she hung out with could not do. He was a regular guy, the kind that she'd not known before. He was kind and polite, and he didn't stay up all night partying. He was good for her. In 1986, the two were married in Las Vegas. Carol had 2 sons from a previous marriage that Sandra loved like her own. His shops did very well, so they were able to take wonderful vacations to places like Maui, and he was the type of man that would take both of their mothers on vacation with them, too.
Aww.
I know, right?
Cute.
Sandra even discovered through the love of a good dog, and ahead of her time, that pet therapy can help heal old wounds.
I firmly believe this.
Absolutely. She even had aspirations to start her own no-kill shelter someday. So let's talk about the fact that people still judged her. They claimed that she had something, they still claimed that she had something to do with the murders. She lived with survivor's guilt, night terrors, and depression her whole life. Then she was approached to tell her story, and she never knew how healing that could be. 40 years after the murders, she met face-to-face with Alan the Boss Fryer to ask him why. Why did he let her live? He responded that she reminded him of his stepdaughter, who was her same age. She told him he did the right thing by not killing her. And after that meeting, they shook hands. After that meeting, she felt lighter, and life seemed to be more sweet. Once the first book released, people came forward to tell her that they too were rape survivors, that they too believed her, and that they were with her. Others came out of the woodwork to give her love and support and send reassurances that they never blamed her for the boys' death, even family of the boys. It's been a healing process for her, and it was so well received that it sparked the second book called Gitchie Girl Uncovered, the true story of a night of mass murder and the hunt for the deranged killers, by the same authors of the first book, Phil Hammond and Sandy Hammond. And this is where I'm going to tell you that Phil Hammond and Mike Hadrith were best friends.
Oh, see, I'm choked up now. So, okay. So he had a vested interest in telling this story because Mike was his friend. BFF at the time.
Yep.
You don't think about that too, right? That there were all of these other kids in this town. We know that they treated her badly because they didn't know what to believe, but look at it from their perspective. They were babies and they didn't know what to believe, and their friends got taken from them.
Their friends got taken from them. Yep. The second book that Phil and his wife wrote goes more into depth about the time the killers were still not caught, and the trials and the killers' convoluted stories blaming one another. It also is more open about Sandra because it was written after she no longer feared of not being believed. So I highly recommend both of them. Phil and Sandy are sure to mention at the end of the second book how Sandra often tells people that the boys were so brave. They never let her... Ooh, okay, pull it together. We got it.
Deep breath.
They never let her know the reality of how serious the situation was to keep her calm.
Yeah.
They did not beg for their lives or try to run and leave her behind. When many would have taken cover, Mike ran to protect her, even after being shot himself. Sandra did get her GED. I did put it in here.
You did?
And pulled her life together. But it took 42 years before the biggest healing could take place through telling her story. She can go to Gitchie, that's what she calls it. She can go to Gitchie now and feel close to the boys. She prays to them as she asks, and she also asks for them to come to her in dreams. She feels connected with them. Their families have made it clear that they don't blame her. And she has become close with many of them throughout her life as they have bonded through tragedy. So I'd like to read you a little note from Sandra herself in the second book, Gitchie Uncovered. Okay. For many years, I didn't think about how my mom must have suffered silently from being the mother of the Gitchie girl. She never said a word, but I know it had to have been difficult. My desire is that everyone who hears my story will use it to spread love and support to make our society a better place. End quote. You know, I always like to leave.
You have me all teared up, so don't look at me.
I know. I love to leave on the note of a survivor or in a victim. So, special thanks again to Patreon Brennan for bringing Sandra's case to us and for allowing us to take a small part in hoping to spread that love and positivity.
Brandon, this is a hell of a story, man, from your hometown. Like you got me here.
Yeah.
Wow.
Me too. And now you understand why it took me a year to put this together.
You did it
but
justice.
we will do it. We will do it. When you give us the recommendations, y'all, we will do it in our own time.
Yeah.
Just so you know, the place at Gitchie where these murders took place.
The haunting.
Yeah, it really is considered one of the most haunted places.
And that's not unbelievable, because there's something bad that happened there. And whether you believe, and I'm a naysayer in spirits or anything or not, just the general feeling and vibe of being in a place where young children were murdered.
You can feel the energy of that.
Of course you can, and it's a negative energy. Yeah. And if you didn't know it when you walked through there, you might not notice it. But knowing something bad happened there, I would for sure have the chills, the shivers up.
I put a note in here for my brain bath.
Okay.
It said, you sent yourself funny jokes, so read those.
Okay, I love it. I love that you reminded yourself.
I did. Let me get my phone.
Okay. You sent yourself funny jokes.
Yep.
I send myself messages like that, too.
That's how I make notes. And just so you know, this is so ridiculous. I don't know how it happened. I think because at one point in time in my husband's phone, which was linked through like our Apple whatevers, he had me in his phone as gorgeous. So when I pull up my number, I put my number, it comes to me as gorgeous.
Oh my God.
Which is just so funny. I didn't name myself that.
Well, you should.
But it's just adorable.
We all should.
We should. But it's just adorable that my husband has that. I'm like, oh, good thing he didn't say heartless bitch. Because he'd have no idea it'd come over like that. Okay, so do you want to hear some funny jokes? We actually never tell corny jokes on this podcast.
I might have said a couple to our Patreons, but our general public needs to hear.
That was such sarcasm.
Here come the bad dad jokes.
Today at the bank, an old lady asked me to help her check her balance, so I pushed her over.
Ba-dum-ba.
3 years ago, my doctor told me I was going deaf. I haven't heard from him since.
These are so stupid.
I know. Isn't this the best way to end a story that made us cry?
Yes, except for now I'm crying more.
The other day, my wife asked me to pass her lipstick, but I accidentally passed her a glue stick. She still isn't talking to me. Oh, God, don't tell Matt that's an option.
I've done that to my own self. It doesn't actually stick your lips together, by the way. It does make them incredibly dry.
I bet. And also, backstory, how did you do that?
Well, I keep chapstick in my right-hand drawer at work, and apparently I put a glue stick there too, and as I'm doing whatever, I literally reached in and grabbed it and just like subconsciously applied it to my lips and immediately knew I had made an error.
In your defense, I can see how chapstick and a glue stick would seem very similar.
I don't wear lipstick. I don't know. I wear lip gloss sometimes.
Me too.
That's colored, but for the most part, I wear chapstick.
Yep, me too. I don't look good in lipstick. I look like I'm trying to be a lady of the night, and I don't do it justice. They do it a lot better.
I think I look great in red lipstick, but very much like a hooker.
Oh.
And I'm okay with it. I just don't do it.
There's a time and a place.
There is. And
yeah.
It's not work.
Yeah, right. To be fair.
Right.
Yeah. My dog is a genius. I asked him, what is 2 minus 2? He said nothing.
This reminds me of Jason and his dad's joke with the dogs from a Patreon episode.
This one actually reminds me of Jason, too, where I think he would think it's legit. I don't want to brag, but I finished the puzzle in under a week, and it said 2 to 4 years on the box.
So cute.
My boss told me to have a good day, so I went home.
Exactly.
That's right.
Exactly. Yep. You can't even fire someone for that. I wouldn't.
For sure.
I prefer to tell people to have the day they deserve, and the rest is up to them.
If that were true for me today, I don't even know what that would mean, because it's been a shit show.
I know. Sometimes we don't have the day we deserve. That's why I wish that upon people.
Right.
Karma sort that shit out.
Well, I'm wondering if karma did today, and then in which case I'm like, where do I need to check myself? Why did I deserve that? What did I do?
Well, according to most of the cases we've heard lately, we could just perform an exorcism.
Oh, good point. Good point. You know what I forgot to talk about with Gitchie when you say exorcism?
The spine.
I also wanted to point out that I love, and this goes back to her spirituality connection, where she asks the boys to visit her in her dreams, and they do. you can do that with your loved ones.
Yeah.
I won't get into it on this podcast, but I'm hoping to in future podcasts in a different realm, that you absolutely can ask loved ones in their energy to come through, and they can come through in dreams, or what we consider dreams, but in our sleep a lot easier energetically wise, because your ego is out of the way. Your human self is out of the way. It's resting, it's sleeping. Your spiritual self can connect. Yeah. So little PSA for all of you. If you have a loved one on the other side that you want to connect with, just reach out to them with your thoughts and intention, and ask them to come and visit you. And the boys do come and visit her.
Wow, we got off track from the jokes, but I was mesmerized.
But isn't that great?
I
do. We will
end. Really good bathing.
It was a good bathing. So anyone can do that. That's not just exclusive to people who are spiritually connected or Native American. Anyone who has a soul. So, these three assholes, sorry,
good luck to the rest
you can't
of you.
do that. Right. Good luck to the rest of you. And on that note, we hope that you keep listening.
Keep it curious.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.